This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories.
Hey friends, episode 716 on deck here, just a few episodes away from our podcasthon.org live stream. That's going to happen actually in March. And I'm interested to hear about why we're doing a podcastathon. What was the idea behind it? Jeremy Manny, he's the founder or co-founder of this initiative. I'm very interested to hear about what prompted the idea. I'm going to be highlighting a local nonprofit here in the Cedar Rapids metro area, and they'll be live on the show that week in March. But before we get there, there's still time for you, if you're a podcaster, to actually participate and think about how you might do that. Now, some of you, if you're doing recorded episodes, you might need to record that relatively quickly. But of course, you know, I'm an advocate of live streamed episodes. So I would recommend to live stream it that week and then publish it right away. But maybe putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit too much here. So let's find out what's behind this idea, who's participating, and why. Why? Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Christoph. I'm very pleased to be there with you and with your audience.
Absolutely. Nice to see you. And podcasthon.org, I've signed up. I know the goal is maybe 1,500 podcast episodes, something like that. But tell me, what prompted the idea, and then, you know, what convinced you to push forward with it?
Well, I may start to explain exactly what it is in a few sentences. So it's a yearly event, an online event, where we try to convince as many podcasters as we can to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice. And here's a twist: they will release their episode all together simultaneously in a coordinated effort, meanwhile, to create a mass effect, a wave of inspiring audio content. Actually, that would be the first edition in English, but the third in French. You may have recognized my French accent. I'm sorry about that. Well, it came up with a simple brainstorming. We are a non-profit organization ourselves. We started to do different kind of initiatives to create different kind of initiative, and we came up with this idea of deciding what could be a charity event in the podcasting world. I love podcasts. I'm listening to a lot of podcasts, and I guess you all do. But we found out there was no initiative of that kind gathering podcasters for greater good, and we decided to invent it. That's just it.
I think it's a great initiative, and certainly it was easy to sign up. And the biggest decision really was, who should I pick? I mean, there's many deserving nonprofits. You know, I could do national nonprofit, global, whatever. I mean, the Red Cross certainly is always a good one. But I picked one, you know, that I volunteered for before, where I know the impact that they have on the community. But you know, I just invited them on the show, you know, and we're not going to be talking about business storytelling. We're not going to be talking about nonprofit marketing, which is what we typically would talk about. And we're just going to be talking about them. So realistically, like, I mean, they're just getting an episode, you know, and it doesn't truly fit with what we normally talk about. What do you have to say? I mean, certainly I've made the decision that I'm going to be doing that. But what do you say to podcasters who go, well, there's no nonprofit that fits with the topic of the show? Do they have to fit, or like just donate? That's not the right term. Just give an episode to a nonprofit and talk about what they do, right? Or how do you feel about that? What would you say to people?
I'm glad you're asking this question, because that's a very important question. Out of the 1,500 podcasters, for sure there will be different strategies. Some will invite a charity that may be in line with their editorial line, so that's quite an easy move. That would be typically an episode with a guest that they could have invited at any other time of the year. But this Podcasthon week is also a good opportunity for many podcasters, you know, to step aside and change a bit their usual format, and invite a charity they care about, maybe personally, and change a bit, the typical conversation that they would have with them. Because if you think about that, podcasting is probably the best medium to convey emotions, to tell stories. And you guys, podcasters, I'm not a podcaster myself, you are great storytellers. So that's a huge opportunity for those charities to be invited at the mic. And they will have 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour maybe or more to explain what they're doing, what is at stake, the challenges. That's really a great opportunity, and that doesn't cost anything. So it's also really cost effective. So they all need, wherever in the world, all those charities, they need to connect with a larger audience, and in particular your audience. I mean, you as podcaster, you have a loyal audience, and because you're a talented podcaster, you manage to grow your audience. So they would benefit from this audience, and the fact that you decide to invite them. That's personally what I like in this podcast initiative, is that each podcaster surprise us by inviting either a local charity, but could be a very large NGO. You said it, you mentioned it, and at the end of the day, that's the vast array of causes and nonprofit organizations that are highlighted, promoted, that makes this event something special and very positive. And to be honest with you, I would be quite embarrassed if I were a podcaster to pick up one myself.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a super difficult decision, but of course I had to get over the whole editorial piece a little bit, I mean, there's no nonprofit, I would think, that really fits with the editorial mission. So it has to be more about, here's what they do, and here's why I think you should consider donating or volunteering for them. Now, the one thing, I was just kind of thinking about earlier is, if all these episodes, I mean, episodes do cost money, right? I mean, like, even if you really technically take it, even the live stream takes money. But this is another reason why I would recommend that people live stream their podcast, because I do very little editing on this. The intro gets cut out and whatever, and then I publish it, right? So my cost per episode is really low. I mean, minuscule, really, because I don't have an editor. It's all basically, AI, blah, blah, blah. So that's true. But for people who, spend who knows how much to edit an episode, how can they get past that? Or maybe the answer is they should just live stream it and follow my model. But what else? I mean, there could be a cost for some podcasts, right?
Anyway, we are talking to podcasters, so that's what they do. They are used to releasing an episode, let's say once a week or once a month, and we don't ask them to create a specific bonus episode just for us. So that would be a normal episode, and they would add that in their calendar editorial. So that's, I mean, the cost is there, and they were planning to have this cost. If they have sponsors, they can keep them. No one expect them to give money to this charity. It's all about raising awareness. I should be more specific about that. It's really not about asking for donation. I mean, you can, that's an option, but it's really about raising awareness, because you have this audience, and well, as I said, charity needs to be promoted this way, and that's not about asking money, but planting seeds for the future, for a long-term relationship, and hoping that all these those listeners will one day, maybe for some of them, become volunteers or become donators. So I get a question. I understand your question about the cost. For sure, it costs something to produce and to release one episode, but I will tend to say it doesn't cost more to participate to the podcaston rather than inviting any other guest. But you have the pleasure to participate to a great cause and a great initiative.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a great initiative for people to participate. Now, when all these episodes come out, I mean, Apple Podcasts could be flooded with Podcasthon episodes. Of course, not everybody will see them, but is there a way for people to follow along and maybe even discover new podcasts that are participating?
Sure, you're right. I mean, we require from all those podcasters to release this episode any day from the 15th of March to the 21st. So that's a Saturday till a Friday, 7 day span, so that it creates the event, because that's just 1 week. And for sure, those episodes will be released on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the usual platforms, but on our website, www.podcaston.org, we make sure that all the podcasters are featured, highlighted, and the direct link of all those episodes will be there. So if anyone is curious and want to, just discover either charities or podcasts or talented podcasters and charities, they just have to visit our website, and they may, I don't know, input a few keywords to fine tune among all those 1,500 podcasters, or just randomly visit. And I mean, it's appearing in random order, so they can refresh the page and they will see other covers, and then decide that maybe they would be interested to listen to this specific charity, or just being interested by the cover, which is original, and be curious about that. So that's how it worked in France and French-speaking countries for the first two editions, and we got those kind of feedback from many podcasters saying they had the best audience of the year, not only because of the website, but because we do partner with a lot of great organizations. And allow me to name, for example, Acast. Acast will offer over 1 million of 30-second audio spots to promote this initiative. So that would mean more curious listeners eager to visit the website and probably discover a few podcasters and the charity that are behind.
Yeah, and that's always an interesting thing too. I mean, it might not be a complete target audience, but certainly your podcast will be exposed to new audience, potential audience members that want to come back and listen to your show. So we always have that. Now, what kind of tips do you have for podcasters who think, hey, this might be a good idea, but I don't even know who to pick? You know, who is an obvious candidate? Like, how do they? I mean, I chose somebody from my past, but how do people go about that? Do they just Google for nonprofits? Do you have a list? Do they how do they decide? Is there like some ideas you can offer?
You're right. We do have a list. Well, two cases. Plan A, you already have in mind a charity you care about or you're connected with, and that's quite easy for you to get access to them, just sending an email or phoning them, calling them, because you have all the details that you need. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. And we'll have the pleasure to discover this charity. But if you don't have any contact in this ecosystem, which might happen, we have a list on our website of charities coming from USA, UK, Australia, South Africa, pretty much every kind of countries, because we maybe I didn't say it yet, but we are welcoming podcasters from 50 different countries so far. Well, most of them are coming from US, then UK, Australia, Canada, but 50 different countries. So my point is that we have a few hundreds of charities that are there, that proactively registered to hopefully be invited at a mic. There's no promise there, because maybe no podcaster will choose them, will pick them, will select them, but they are there, the details are there, and they input some description of what they are doing with some keywords. So normally you can just input those keywords, fine tune your search, and make your decision based on what you can read, and that would make it easier for them to connect with the charity. So if you're a podcaster interested in participating in this podcaston, but you're not too sure about who you should contact, it's quite easy. Just register first, and then you'll get access to this directory, the full list of charities. And if you can't find your match, we'll help you. We have a small team of highly motivated volunteers, and they'll be there to try to find out which charity could be interesting for you, and select for you a handful of them, so that you can pick up the one you care about or the one you're interested in.
Fantastic tips. Now let's talk about the nonprofits for a second. I mean, you and I are on I mean, we're doing this. We have good mics, we have good lighting. I mean, I don't even want to tell you how many lights are in front of me. It's a little blinding, quite frankly, but at least I'm well lit here. But how about the nonprofits? I mean, what do they need to think about when they go on a podcast? How do they make it a success? Because I mean, there's a little bit of an art and science to bringing the steak and the sizzle, for lack of a better term, right? I mean, telling people why it's important what they do, but you also have to tell a good story, right? So it is a little bit of marketing for them. But what tips should be offered to nonprofits who might not go on podcasts all that often?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah.
I think I lost you there for a second. Start that again.
Sorry. My mic is muted. Okay, perfect. So that's a very good question. I would suggest all those charities to really prepare upfront this interview, if it's an interview. Let me add that it might be a solo episode, so you don't have to invite a charity. But assuming you want to invite a representative of a charity at your mic, I would strongly encourage you to prepare that, both podcasters and charity. So charity has to be clear on the message they want to convey. It takes time to prepare that, And if you're a podcaster, ideally send them upfront a list of questions so that they have time to prepare and think about what would be the answer, but also a list of prerequisite IT technical prerequisites, so that we're talking about, yeah, maybe a good headphone could be enough, but ideally check that up front with them. So it could be a 15 minutes meeting 1 week earlier, just to make sure that the sound will be okay. I'm assuming that most podcasters are doing that because they might invite guests who are not all specialists of talking at a mic, and sometimes it's worth preparing that up front with any kind of guest, but even more so with a charity, because as you mentioned, as you stressed out, they might not be ready to for this exercise, so it will be a rehearsal might be useful.
Yeah, you say you assume everybody does that, and I don't typically send my guests questions at all, and typically that's because I want it to be more of an organic conversation. I wanted to have, I don't want it to be too scripted. Now, so just keep that in mind too. Is if you're a nonprofit, you don't want to sound too scripted. You want to sound human. You want to have a conversation. So certainly it's okay to prepare. But I think nonprofits, if they come on a show, they can talk about what they do. I mean, they do it all the time. I think the biggest thing is not to think of it as like a TV interview or something. It's just a
Sure.
friendly conversation. Share what impact you're making on the community, or whatever your area is, and kind of go from there, and take the opportunity to get in front of people. And then, of course, repurpose the content afterwards. I mean, I'm always a big fan of using content everywhere. Now, tell me about your nonprofit and you're in France, correct?
France and in Montreal in Canada. So we have both sisters organizations. So it started in France, but I'm based in Montreal in Canada, and the organization is split it into two.
And tell me about the nonprofit. What's the nonprofit for? What's the mission, etc.?
Yeah, our name is Altru We, like altruism, and the we, just like us. Our goal is, to try to engage people in these charitable causes through digital channels, through tools. For sure, this podcast is our, our best initiative, the one with the best successes. But we tried different kind of things, and we see ourselves as kind of laboratory trying to invent new concept, and some will work, some might not work, but the common point is that we are not able as a non-profit ourselves to select any kind of cause that we care about, because there's too many. So our objective is more to engage a larger circle of supporters, meaning inviting all those charities to be more known, to raise awareness on them through different channels. That could be a podcast, it could be through LinkedIn or via LinkedIn, could be via, well, different things. We also created a social networks dedicated to these kind of messages, conveying those positive actions that all those charities are doing on the ground every day. And that's what we do. So we started in France and in Canada, and we're trying to to break barriers of languages and countries, and to extend it to many countries.
Fantastic. Maybe to wrap it up here, give me like the overview of how to sign up. I mean, I remember it wasn't super difficult, but it may have been harder if I didn't have a nonprofit already lined up, right? I mean, you have to upload like the logos, I think, and things like that. What should podcasters do? Pick a nonprofit, or come to the site and look for one, and then sign up, or what would you recommend on the process?
That's really easy, very straightforward. That's a breeze, and that's completely free. We should say it. So, assuming you're a podcaster, you're listening to us, and you want to participate, that's very easy. So you just have to register your own podcast through our website. There is a specific form. You will easily find it on www.podcaston.org. It takes pretty much 90 seconds to register your podcast, meaning inputting the name of your podcast, your own name, your email, the cover of your podcast, and a few URLs, for example, your link on Apple Podcast, so that it would be showcased on our website, the homepage of our website. And from there, you're at the end of step one. Step two is to select a charity you care about, but you don't have to have it in mind at this very specific moment after step one. You can register even with no clue about the charity you want to highlight, because from there, once you registered, we know that you're interested, and we can get in touch with you, send you guidelines, full support. We have prepared everything, and we help you craft your episode by fine-tuning your search. So as I said, you will have access to this directory of charity, so you don't have to have it in mind before registering. And step two would be quite easy too. It would be, once you made up your mind about the charity, just write it down, the name of this charity, the website of this charity, maybe if there is a donation link, but it's not compulsory, and just upload a logo that you would easily find probably on internet. So it takes maybe 1 minute more to do that. And from there, it's almost done. Ideally, you would just tell us when you plan to release your episode, if it's a Friday, if it's a Monday, if it's Wednesday, so that we can be prepared to see to listen to your episode and react to it. And ideally, that would be also, you would promote your episode when you would release it. So if you can send us, if you're promoting it on Instagram, just send us a link of your post so that we are sure not to miss it. You can also tag us. That's also an easy way to reach out to us. And then we'll make sure that we will like it, comment it, share it, trying to amplify not only the visibility of your post, but ideally the number of listeners that you will have on your own podcast. And we also encourage all those podcasters to call their audience to listen to other episodes of this Podcasthon. So, that's a way of sharing the audience. And that's also why many people discover new podcasts during this specific event, and hopefully will become loyal listeners for the future.
Fantastic tips. And the one tip I want to reiterate too is, when you look for people's logos, just go on the web and search for it. I mean, asking people for logos can just be a heavy lift for some reason for them to send it to you. So that's exactly what I did for my nonprofit. And you'll see in March, it's the middle of that week, or maybe it's the beginning of the week, something like that, where I'll be talking to them. Jeremy, nice to see you. Thanks for the great initiative and the great overview. Everybody, check out podcasthon.org if you have a podcast and consider participating. And we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. See you then.